Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. It's a cool evening in Malibu, California in early 1983. The studio lights, they may be a little softer than usual. There's that strange quiet that settles in when something long and familiar is ending. Crew members linger, scripts are folded and tucked away. Someone laughs a little too loudly, someone else wipes at their eyes and pretends it's nothing. At the center of the room, the cast gathers one more time. Arms around shoulders, 11 seasons together. Shared meals, shared exhaustion, shared success. And Alan Alda is standing in the center of it all. He looks strong, confident, established. The kind of man who seems like he's always been steady on his feet as he and his colleagues wrap the final day of shooting ever for the amazingly popular TV show MASH. But 4 decades earlier, in 1942, he was a 7-year-old boy in New York City who couldn't move his legs because he had contracted polio. His parents chose something called the Sister Kinney method, named after Elizabeth Kinney, an Australian nurse who rejected the standard treatment of the day. Instead of immobilizing patients in braces and casts, she used heated wool compresses and aggressive muscle therapy, stretching instead of freezing, movement instead of confinement. Doctors were divided. Some called it reckless, others called it revolutionary. By the early 1940s, major clinics in the United States were using her approach, but it was still controversial enough that families were gambling when they chose it. Now, as you've already understood, Alan Alda survived very well. He recovered mobility, he built a life. But in the summers of the 1940s and early 1950s, survival still felt like a roll of the dice. Swimming pools closed and movie theaters emptied. Parents kept children inside when outbreaks flared up. Treatment was improving, but prevention didn't yet exist. And then, on March 26, 1953, a scientist stepped in front of a microphone and suggested something radical. What if polio didn't have to be endured at all? What if it could be stopped before it started? And if that were true, who would have to build it, fund it, test it, and manufacture it fast enough to matter? Because the discovery is one thing, but distribution is business. And on March 26, 1953, business was about to be pulled into the fight. By the early 1950s, polio wasn't rare, it was actually seasonal. Each summer, case numbers climbed. In 1952 alone, the United States recorded nearly 58,000 cases, more than 3,000 deaths, tens of thousands left with paralysis. Parents learned to read newspaper headlines the way farmers read weather reports. And in hospital wards across the country, rows of what were called iron lungs lined the walls. They were 6-foot steel cylinders, rounded at the ends with only a patient's head exposed through a rubber collar. The rest of the body lay sealed inside. A motor hummed. A diaphragm inside the machine rhythmically changed the air pressure, forcing the chest to rise and fall. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. If the machine stopped, so did the breathing. The sound was constant, a mechanical sigh over and over again. Nurses moved between the cylinders, adjusting mirrors so children could see their parents reflected back at them. Some patients would lie there for weeks, others for years. It wasn't confined to one class, one city, or one background. Urban neighborhoods, rural towns, movie stars, factory workers, the virus moved through swimming pools, playgrounds, and church picnics with equal indifference. Organizations like the March of Dimes had already turned fear into fundraising. Small coins mailed in by ordinary Americans financed research labs and university trials. Philanthropy had become organized, systematic, and national, but research is not the same as resolution. Inside a lab at the University of Pittsburgh, a doctor by the name of Jonas Salk was working on what's called a killed virus vaccine, which was an approach many experts doubted. Most researchers believed that only a live virus vaccine would produce immunity. Salk believed that the immune system could be trained safely without risking the live virus. If he was right, the implications stretched far beyond medicine, because a vaccine is not just a discovery. It's glass vials, sterilized equipment, trained technicians, distribution networks, liability exposure, and public trust. Basically, it's the challenge of turning fragile science into reliable supply. And on March 26, 1953, that fragile idea stepped into public view.
Retirement can be scary, but only if you're not prepared. That's why AARP created thisispretirement.org. Because unless you've already retired, you're in pretirement, and you still have time to plan. Learn about retirement savings options, potential tax breaks, and how you can build savings over time. Visit thisispretirement.org for free resources to help you customize your action plan and feel the retirement fear disappear. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
On that date, March 26, 1953, Dr. Jonas Salk stepped in front of reporters and announced early results from his vaccine trials. It wasn't the final field study, it wasn't mass approval, but it was enough to change the temperature in the room. For the first time, there was evidence that polio might be preventable. The announcement rippled outward pretty quickly. Newspapers carried it the next morning, radio programs discussed it that night. And almost immediately, the question shifted from, can this work, to can we make enough of it? That shift pulled business into the center of the story. Producing a killed virus vaccine required growing large quantities of poliovirus, inactivating it with formaldehyde, purifying it, and then sealing it in sterile glass vials. Every step required precision. Every step carried risk. Contamination wouldn't mean defective merchandise, it would mean infection. With this announcement, the March of Dimes moved from fundraising to coordination. The March of Dimes had begun in 1938 as the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, founded with the support of Franklin D. Roosevelt, himself a polio survivor. Its motto was simple but revolutionary. Instead of relying on wealthy patrons alone, it asked ordinary Americans to mail in a dime at a time. Millions did. School children, factory workers, families. The organization turned small coins into laboratory grants and national research coordination. And with the support and coordination by the March of Dimes, pharmaceutical companies, including Eli Lilly, Park Davis, Cutter Labs, and Wyeth, began preparing for something unprecedented: mass biological manufacturing under public scrutiny. This wasn't a niche product launch. This was a nation waiting. By 1954, one of the largest medical field trials in history was underway, involving more than 1.8 million American children. They were called polio pioneers. Parents signed consent forms, schools became distribution hubs. Nurses lined up children in gymnasiums, sleeves rolled up. Science had stepped forward. Now it was time for business to scale up.
Imagine home. The smell of coffee, the sound of a lawnmower, the sun's warmth on your face. Free to be yourself, surrounded by love that helps you grow. This is a place to call home. That's an American dream we all deserve. But in 50% of U.S. states, you could legally be denied housing if you are LGBTQ+. Get the facts and hear real stories at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
In April 1955, after the massive field trials, the vaccine was declared safe, effective, and potent. Church bells rang in some towns and factory whistles blew. In classrooms across America, teachers paused to explain what had just happened. But scaling up is unforgiving. Within weeks, a batch produced by Cutter Laboratories was found to contain live poliovirus. More than 200 cases of paralysis were linked to improperly inactivated doses, and several children died. The Cutter incident focused the industry and regulators to confront a brutal reality. Manufacturing biology was not like manufacturing steel. It required oversight, standardization, and federal control at a level the country had not yet really built. Production paused, processes tightened, and liability reshaped corporate risk calculations. Federal regulation deepened, and then manufacturing resumed. By the end of the decade, polio cases in the United States had dropped by more than 90%. Swimming pools reopened. Summer fear receded. The iron lungs that once filled hospital wards became relics. Prevention had become scalable. What began as a lab experiment had evolved into a coordinated system involving nonprofits, pharmaceutical firms, regulators, schools, and millions of families. Alan Alda's generation survived polio through treatment and luck. The generations that followed would largely avoid it altogether. Because on March 26, 1953, when Dr. Salk announced his findings, the fight against polio stopped being only about survival, and it became about production. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, do me a favor and don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better, without the fluff or the buzzwords or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.